Hello and welcome back to Raid. Today is day 2 of the Titus event, and yesterday all I did was farm food for this epic we're gonna have to fuse. Today I'm just gonna be doing some shard pulls and I'm going to be farming dragon. That is just the plan for today. So I believe I just need to do 4 sacreds and 7 voids. Should do it. Alright. Wish me luck. Royal Guard. I believe this guy is pretty good. Attacks on enemy has a 50% chance of placing 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Okay, defense down. Attacks all enemies, damage increase according to enemies max HP, damage based on attack enemy max HP. Oh yeah, the enemy max HP guy, that's right, this guy is pretty good. Attacks 4 times at random, each hit has a 60% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Each hit also has a 60% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 25%, damage based on attack. Okay. And his aura is ally attack in dungeons by 35%. Not bad. Jarek. I believe this guy is decent as well. Attacks one enemy has a 35% chance of placing 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. Places a 50% ally protection and a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. Okay. Places a 50% continuous heal buff on an ally for 1 turn whenever an ally loses 20% of their max HP on hit. Gives all allies HP in all battles by 33%. Not bad. Sachi. Attacks all enemies has a 40% chance of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. Attacks one enemy has a 75% chance of placing 30% decreased crit rate debuff and a leech debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. Places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns and attacks one enemy. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 20% if this attack is a critical. Okay, so she's a turn meter pusher. That's pretty nice. Rise a random ally with 30% HP whenever this champion kills an enemy. Has a 50% chance of placing a fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn whenever an ally is revived. Okay. Situational reviver, but not bad. And Adriel. Attacks one enemy has a 20% chance of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. Heals all allies at 20% of their max HP and places a 30% reflect damage buff on them. Attacks all enemies has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Has a 100% chance if this attack is critical. With this increased magic ally speed in all battles, only magic ally. It's very specific. Okay. Let's see. Now I believe it should be 7 voids. Hoping to luck out and get a seer. See what happens. Towering Titan. Attacks one enemy has a 40% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns, damage based on HP. Attacks 4 times at random. The first hit has a 100% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn. Each of the other hits has a 50% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn, damage based on HP. Places a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. Places a 15% continuous heal buff on this champion for 2 turns, as well as a shield buff on this champion equal to 30% of their max HP for 3 turns. Grants an extra turn. Not bad. Will transfer 50% of the damage inflicted to Cage Breaker to this champion during battle. Only available when Cage Breaker is on the same team. If multiple Cage Breakers are on the team, this champion will only transfer the damage from one of them. Interesting champ. Or Amaranthine Skeleton. Attacks one enemy has a 30% chance of placing a block buffs debuff for 2 turns, damage based on defense. Attacks one enemy has an 80% chance of placing a block active skill debuff for 1 turn. Also has an 80% chance of placing a 50% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. Okay, if you need that. Attacks one enemy places a 30% increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns. Sounds okay. Very situational. Steadfast Marshal. Attacks one enemy has a 50% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn if the target's HP percentage is lower than this champion's. Damage based on HP. Places a 60% increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns. Grants an extra turn. Places a Veil buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Oh, he's a Veiler. Okay. Interesting. Terrorix the Restless. Attacks one enemy, places a 25% increased accuracy buff on this champion for 2 turns. Damage based on defense. Attacks all enemies has a 50% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn. Damage based on defense. Protects a 50% strength buff on all allies for 2 turns. Also places a counter attack buff on this champion for 2 turns. I don't know about him. Harvester. Attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 35% chance of placing a 50% weakened debuff for 2 turns, damage based on attack. Attacks one enemy, has an 80% chance of placing a block buffs debuffs for 2 turns, damage based on attack. Block buffs goes to 100%. Attacks one enemy has a 90% chance of increasing the cooldown of one of the target skills by 2 turns, and it does go to 100%. 4 turns. She seems okay. Very situational. Bellhound. I believe this is the speed farmer. Increases to all enemies. Attacks all enemies, has a 25% chance of placing a 15% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on defense and attack. Places a 7.5 continuous heal buff and a 50% reflect damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. Places a block damage buff on an ally for 1 turn. Increases ally defense faction crypts. Okay, I'm not sure if this guy is I thought it was called Hellhound, not the Fellhound. Oh well, we will keep going. Painsmith. Attacks one enemy. Damage based on attack. Attacks one enemy. Enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived. Places a block debuff buff on this champion for 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. Damage based on attack. Attacks one enemy. Damage increases by 15% if the target has no active buffs. Damage based on attack. Increases allied attack dungeons by 21%. And I believe that should be all of them. Let's do one more for good luck, baby. We got this. Alright. Delaware. Attacks all enemies has a 20% chance of placing a block active skill debuff for 1 turn. Damage based on attack. Attacks on enemies has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. Attacks all enemies has a 75% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Oh, that was the regular. Attacks all enemies has a 75% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. And has a 25% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. He's got a speed aura. Okay. Not bad. Didn't get anybody that I really wanted. But that's okay. No thank you. No thank you. And no thank you. Let's go into segments. Yeah. Oh wow, I'm still short. Okay, I did not calculate that right. 20 for each one. Where's my total right here? So what, 2 regular shards? Yeah, so guess so. Or maybe it will take some time to calculate. That's fine. We'll just use 2 more shards. It's fine. Maybe we luck out. We'll see. Wagon Bane. Attacks one enemy has a 35% chance of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. Attacks one enemy, places a 7.5 continuous heal buff on the ally with the lowest HP for 2 turns. Attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Also has a 75% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 15%. Okay. We can go one more and this should do it. And we ended on a Dune Strider. Attacks one enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Attacks 3 times at random. Each critical hit decreases the target's turn meter by 10%, will only decrease their turn meter once per target. Attacks all enemies, then attacks the enemy with the lowest HP, has a 75% chance of placing a 100% heal reduction debuff on the enemy with the lowest HP for 2 turns. Damage based on attack. Okay. And that should be it. Turn event. Summon Rush. And we are complete. I got the shards. Would like to get more, but that's okay. Okay, well, thank you for watching. Until next time.